All in favor of adding Russ Smith to the security team, say aye. Any opposed, like sign? So moved. Russ Smith is now a member of the security team of the church. And the second part of Jake's statement there was that they are been asked to consider some new names for the youth committee. They have begun that process and will have recommendations by the next business meeting. All right, thank you, Jake. Any other committees? Artie? Would you like a microphone? Get after it.
Got a few financial things to go over from the personnel committee. I am standing in for Kevin Shaw. He is in Louisiana tonight, so I'm on the committee, and I was going to get up and talk. So that's my role for that committee tonight. We are about 3 months late in getting the salaries That's all I got for that part, and then I have more after that.
Okay,
So
you
this
wanna,
first part
you wanna
needs
address
to
that
be
first?
discussed and voted. and-
Okay, so is the motion, I just wanna make sure I'm clear here, is the back pay tied to the increase, or would we like to vote on those separately?
Probably separate.
Okay, so let's take those one at a time, and then we'll do the back pay lot and block, not individual.
Right.
Okay. All right, so, we have the recommendation from the Personnel Committee to increase the salaries. Tonight, we're addressing youth and music and children's. Youth and music will be the first thing. We don't need a second. We'll open it up for discussion, but the pay will increase by 5% to a new salary. And if you weren't catching all those numbers, under the personnel line items, those are the 200 level on your business report. You can see those budgeted salaries for 2023 on there, so you can see the increase when we look across. Youth music would go from $50,022.41 to $52,523.53, which is a 5% increase. Do we have? Well, we'll do both. Also with children's, we'll take the children's director salary from $61,880 to $10,000 even. A little bit more than 5%, however, given the amount, the percentage just goes up with it, but you can see the increase there. Do we have any discussion about the pay increases as recommended by the Personnel Committee? Since it is coming from a committee, like I said, we don't have to have a motion or second. We just will go ahead and vote on it. All in favor of giving these raises to these positions, say aye. Any opposed, like sign? Okay, new pay is been approved. The next part of that is the back pay portion. Because it is March, we've had 2 complete months. In our fiscal year and our calendar year run concurrently, so 2 months into the fiscal year, and so with these pay increases, the recommendation from the Personnel Committee is to pay that difference back for the first 2 months that they didn't see the pay increase during the fiscal year. So that is the recommendation. Do we have any discussion on that point? All in favor of back pay in the amounts provided, say aye. Any opposed, like sign? Motion passes. Okay,
All right, thank you.
those are done. Next.
Smooth and easy. The next thing is gonna be just really, for your information, we have been in the talks with Brother Jim and taking on the, possible, if the vote goes a certain way this coming Sunday, taking on, more responsibility in serving as the interim pastor. We have been talking about salary and responsibility and the things that he'll do. So
I mean, I got a way we can get it, but then we'll need the trustees to come by the bank, sign papers.
So, anyway, we're gonna start fundraising and putting some money to the side to go into helping paying for this piano to be replaced. So if you're wondering what happened to the piano down the hall down there, that's where it is. Miss Janet took it back, gave us $1,000 to start a new fund for this piano to be repaired. Any questions? I don't know if I'll ever give you an answer, but that's all I know for now. Um, the other thing, as far as music committee and things like that, is I have announced it to a few people, but I just wanted to make sure that in this setting that it be told that there is a newly established piano lesson scholarship fund for San Hill Baptist Church. That was established a few weeks ago, and anyone in our church, I say anyone, this is aimed primarily at children. So Jim, if you want to take piano lessons, sorry. This is mainly set up for children. I'm not sure exactly what the age limit cutoff is, but there is a fund set up that Lindsay, Elsie, and myself are the people in charge of the fund and the checkbook and all that. And anybody that's taking monthly piano lessons, we're going to have some forms, and you fill it out, and so the scholarship money will go towards membership, the members, not just somebody down the road somewhere, but church members to take piano lessons. There is a newly established piano scholarship fund for that. But I have forms that will be passing without anybody whose children are taking piano lessons. I think that's all I have to talk about.
Thank you, Artie. Nothing to vote on those last announcements there, so that was just informational. If you would like, just for the sake of brevity, if you missed anything, see Artie afterwards. He will go over that with you one-on-one after the end. But exciting things. Any other committees present tonight that want to give or need to give any type of report? Oh, well, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that update, Cody. That's great. I trust everybody heard that, but we voted to get a new computer. Wasn't quite the right one, and got one donated that met the needs and saved the money, so good deal. God provides. All right. Well, now this is the one that's hard to get the seconds and the agreements on. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Okay. is this, and I know you may be surprised, I'm not being smart right now. Is this a recommendation to vote on the continued use, or is this letting us know that a vote will be coming in the month? Okay, does anyone need any type of clarification on what is going on before we present for the next one? CC, the homeschool community that meets here, which we have several families that are members of, meet here once a week throughout the day to use our facilities. To be honest, we've been, I think, fairly blessed by it. So go ahead then, make your motion. All right, so we have a motion by Brett Bouchelon to continue to allow Classical Conversations to use our facilities in like manner. I won't say the exact same way, but in like manner as currently agreed upon for the next school year. That would be the 24-25 school year. Do we have a second? Thank you. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Brett. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Y'all just want to give me a workout on Robert's rules on my first business meeting back. Thank you. Jacob makes a motion that we adjourn. We have a second from Marty. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank y'all. I don't know if we have anybody taking minutes, but if anybody would like to do that, I kind of started, and you can take this and put it in better words. I'll be more than happy to let anybody do that wants. All right, well, we'll go into our prayer meeting time now. And so hopefully everybody got a chance to grab a prayer list. They are on the table in the foyer right under the television. If you didn't get one, you can go grab one real quick. But otherwise, we're going to look through this and make sure we have any updates or additions, subtractions as needed. And then we'll spend some time in prayer for our church. So give you just a moment to look over that. Okay. All right, so that was the Sellers family. They had a house fire, lost their home, and in that an individual was badly burned and is in Jackson receiving treatment for her injuries, and that's Anna Norris. And so be praying for all of those, certainly. All right. Hope Jones. Thank you, Kelly. For those of you, I know we got new and old folks. Some of y'all remember Hope and Connor when they were here, but Hope is the one we're praying for there. She's had some complications and had surgeries that led to other complications, and just continue to pray for her during this healing as she continues to recover and be with her family during that time. Okay. And just making sure, somebody correct me, is that Emily's son? Yes? Okay. I assume so, but I just didn't want. Okay. Gotcha. Okay, so that's Gene Thomas, originally diagnosed with bone cancer, and recent PET scans have shown that it's spread pretty much throughout, and not it's not his desire to do any more treatment. It is still the family's desire for him to continue with treatment. Okay, that's a very, very tough situation there.
Brother Jim, my friend Lonnie Stevens is on that list.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for him. He's got really late stage bone cancer. I think it's in his liver also. They have grown sons. He was career Navy. He put in probably 25, 30 years in the Navy, and found out last summer he's had a lot of back issues, and thought it was a pinched nerve or split disc, but when they did a scan, his bone had, he had cancer all over. So he's really sick, taking treatments, and just really sick and not doing good.
Okay. Thank you.
They live out around between Myrick and Powers community.
Okay. There's an update on Lonnie Stevens. He is on there, right below Mr. Thomas, side by side on that list. Both with bone cancer and both not good prognosis.
They transferred, supposed to have her after
to update on Miss Rosalie. She's doing better, and we can take her off there. And I know y'all saw, we'll leave him on here, but if you made it to dinner tonight, or he was here Sunday too, Sean has his halo off, and he's up and about. He's standing about 6 inches taller, I think. But he says he's feeling good. And so, any others? Yeah. With all of this change, it's a lot that's incorporated and encompassed within it. That's kind of wrapped up together. We do want to make sure that just as you're praying in your personal devotional time, that you do remember our pastor as he embarks on this new calling that the Lord has given him with this new church. If you don't know, it's Open Door, I think Baptist Church, but Open Door Church Fellowship. It is a Baptist church. I just don't know if they have Baptist on the name. In Ragley, Louisiana. And so you can, if you have to get away, you want to go see him, it won't offend me. But you can go see James, but that's where he'll be. And so continue to pray for him and that church, and pray for our church. As we heard from the nominating committee, one of the reasons they were meeting tonight was also to kind of begin the process of finding a pastor search committee, or putting that together. If you're not familiar with the way Baptist churches, and I won't speak for all Baptist churches, Southern Baptist churches, we don't move real fast on a whole lot, but we're going to, way we do this, where we form a nominating committee, we'll recommend people for a pastor search committee, who will then begin to collect resumes, go through recommendations. They will visit and listen to pastors, talk with pastors, kind of do some preliminary interviews, and we'll kind of whittle it down until they feel like God has put a man on their heart, that they will then meet with the deacons, and they will discuss, and then if everybody is in agreement, usually the man will be brought in for a trial sermon and voted on. And so that's kind of the process. And as you can see, it takes me 3 or 4 minutes to explain it. It takes a while to play out. And so do be in prayer that we get a good committee. Be in prayer that that committee is able to listen to God and find the man that he has prepared here. Because if we do believe that God has called James to his church, we have to believe that then that God has called somebody else to this church. And so, we can rest assured in that, and, place our faith in his goodness and his faithfulness. Not preaching yet. That was just a side note. Any other prayer requests? Okay. Do I have get a couple of volunteers to pray tonight? You gonna do it? Go ahead, William. For those of you who don't know William, that was William. He prayed for us, and I appreciate that, sir. I got a head nod. All right. Well, I think that covered it. Okay. Let's go ahead. I was torn where to go tonight. I know that Brother Ray told me that in the morning they're doing Daniel, right? And I know Brother James has been going through 1 Samuel. And so I was torn. Do I finish something that's already been started, or do I start something new? And Mr. Ray, I hope you'll forgive me. I've got a little too much OCD to leave something unfinished. We're going to be in 1 Samuel 19. And we're going to look at this. It's a little bit of a lengthy chapter. We 24 verses, but there's some interesting things in it that I think we can just kind of read through and pick out tonight. I know a lot of you, some of you, are new and may not have sat in a class with me as a teacher. I'm a little more comfortable with back and forth. I like to ask questions. I realize this format doesn't really lend itself. However, if you just have something, Jim, I got to know, raise your hand. I'll call on you. And if I don't know it, I'll tell you, or dodge the question, and we'll figure it out together. But Samuel is a great book. I mean, anytime you get to go through the histories of the nation of Israel, through the kings, this is kind of starting that kingly line, which I know James does a wonderful job of explaining the background of the Old Testament, kind of being his field of study. For those of you who don't know, he got his master's degree in Old Testament. He loves it. I enjoy it. He loves it. And so we'll go through it, and I'll try to do my best. But Samuel, when you go through the histories of Israel, is where we pick up with those kingly lines. It starts off with Samuel being brought to Eli as a boy, and we follow him up. And then Saul is called to be king, and then David is anointed subsequently. And then last chapter, in chapter 18, we saw famously David defeat Goliath, and David is now in the service of King Saul. Because sometimes we think about David and Goliath kind of being the point that David takes charge, but actually no, that's just where he gets in the favor of the king, and he's still now a boy that's serving the king. And so that's kind of where we're picking up here in chapter 19. So we'll just read through kind of paragraph or so at a time, and then discuss with what we're being taught. So 19 verse 1 says, Now Saul told Jonathan his son and all his servants to put David to death. But Jonathan, Saul's son, greatly delighted in David. So Jonathan told David, saying, Saul my father is seeking to put you to death. Now therefore please be on guard in the morning, and stay in a secret place and hide yourself. I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. If I find out anything, then I will tell you. Then Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, Do not let the king sin against his servant David, since he has not sinned against you, and since his deeds have been very beneficial to you. For he took his life in his hands and struck the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by putting David to death without a cause? Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul vowed, As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. Then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these words. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as formerly. Now, when we pick this up in this verse, and y'all, again, I know you guys may have been going through it. I'm picking up kind of cold. And so when I look at this, the first question that kind of jumps out at me as we open it up is, what has happened that just all of a sudden Saul wants to kill David? Anytime you have a passage that just begins with, Now Saul told Jonathan, his son, and all his servants to put David to death, surely there's something that caused that reaction on Saul's behalf, or what is going on in Saul's life. When we look back up, just one verse, it says, Then the commanders of the Philistines went out to battle, and it happened as often as they went out that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so his name was highly esteemed. So what is going on here? Why is Saul just all of a sudden fed up with David? Well, he's done so because David's making a name for himself. In this day and age, Saul was the first king of Israel. He was the first one. It says the people came, they pled with God, make us like other nations, give us a king. So he said, fine, you want to do it? And, anytime God kind of goes, okay, I'll give you what your heart desires, that's not going to work out well for you. But that's what happens here for Israel. He gave them what their heart desired. He said, fine, you want a king, you can have a king. And they get Saul. And Saul, because of an impetuous nature, he offends God to the point where it says God removed his spirit from Saul. And so Saul is 100% just carnal at this point. The Lord is not guiding him. He is not seeking God in any matter. He's following after his own heart, which is interesting because it was exactly that sort of thinking that led to him being king in the first place. The people were following after their own heart. And it was the pattern that's been seen with the judges for, hundreds of years previous to this, that the people did what was right in their own eyes, and that's how they made their decisions. And so when God removes his spirit from Saul, we see Saul doing that exact same thing. And so if you're a king and you've got nothing to consider except your own fleshly desire, in a day and age where the king was basically the baddest man on the planet, in the area, if you're the king and you got somebody that's tougher and bigger and badder than you are, you're not going to be king for long. And so if you got David who's going out and he's winning all the battles and he's getting a name for himself, well, how long before the army falls in line behind David? So you can see how Saul's thinking kind of takes place and takes off from here. And so when verse 1 picks up in 19, we see that's exactly what's happening. Saul wants David put to death. He said, I need this guy gone. And so Saul begins to move in that direction. But Jonathan is a good friend of David. Now, we got one set of little ears. There are earmuffs. There are people who will accuse David and Jonathan of having an inappropriate relationship. That's it, Katie. We're good. There is nothing to substantiate that claim from Scripture. What they do is they look at verses like verse 1, where it says that Jonathan greatly delighted in David. And they will put a modern spin on an ancient text. Remember, this was not written in English, and it was not written to a 21st century audience. It was not written to a 20th century audience. This was written to a people thousands of years ago in a different dialect, in a different culture, at a different time. And so the translation we have, for us to read in anything that is not expressly stated, is not the way you are supposed to exegete Scripture. Now, I know exegete is a word that maybe you've heard before, maybe you haven't, but exegete is just to get the truth out of something. Whenever you're reading something that's not written to you, that's you're having to kind of deal with, you get the truth in one of two ways. You can read it and you can take truth from it, or you can do, that's called exegesis, or you can read truth into it, and that's called eisegesis. And anytime you get a situation where you're trying to read something in that's not there, you're doing eisegesis, and that is not proper handling of God's words. And I hope you would say, well, why, Jim? Why is that wrong? Because they're not your words. They're God's words. And so it's His meaning that matters, not yours. And so what we do when we study Scriptures, we make sure that we're gathering what's in it to come out. We're not putting our context in. This is God's words to His people. And so that's really important. So just, I want to throw that out there. I like to not skim over the hard parts. That's something you're going, if you hadn't seen it before, you will. That's a common claim about Jonathan and David. We don't have evidence of that in Scripture. They were really good friends. They greatly delighted in him. There are people that I am not intimate with in any type of physical way that I greatly delight being in their presence. And that's all that is. And so they greatly delighted in one another. Verse 2, Jonathan begins to try to calm down his father Saul, reminding him of all that David had done in dealing with the Philistines. And we know that it wasn't just the killing of Goliath that David did. He also saved the entire nation. Because what was the condition of the battle? You bring out your best person, we bring out our best person. If we win, we'll serve you, and if you win, we serve you, and if we win, you serve us. And that was a national agreement. And so when David goes and defeats Goliath, this is not just, that, hey, David won, yay, Goliath is dead. It's, hey, we don't have to go be slaves for the Philistines now. And so this was a great thing that David did. Jonathan reminds Saul about that, and Saul calms down. He said, you're right. And they went back to their former agreement that David's there in his presence. Verse 8, when there was war again, David went out and fought with the Philistines and defeated them with a great slaughter, so that they fled before him. Now, that verse sounds awful familiar to verse 30 at the end of chapter 18. Just keep that in mind as we keep reading. Now there was an evil spirit from the Lord on Saul as he was sitting in his house with a spear in his hand. That's never a good thing. And David was playing the harp with his hand. Saul tried to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he slipped away out of Saul's presence so that he stuck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. So, a couple of things in this. One, you see the pattern continue. David is militarily strong. He shows his strength and his prowess in battle. This makes Saul angry. Saul tries to kill him. Now, one thing that we see in here that we do need to address, and I cannot remember, I think it has appeared prior in Samuel about evil spirits from the Lord coming upon Saul. I'm getting Hank's nodding yes. So I'm tracking with Hank here. How do we explain that? How do we have an evil spirit from God coming over and tormenting Saul? The answer is fairly straightforward if you go back and think about Scripture. Do we have anywhere else in Scripture that we see this? And we do from the book of Job. In the book of Job, what happens? Satan comes to the presence of God after walking to and fro on the earth, and God looks at him and says, how do you consider my servant Job? He's faithful, he's loyal. And Satan said, well, of course he is. You blessed him. He said, well, fine, go test him. God allows Satan to go and test Job. And so what we see here is God has removed his spirit from Saul at this time. Saul has offended God, and so God has moved his spirit from him. And so God has permitted evil spirits to tempt and test Saul during this time. God does not send them, but they are from him in that he's allowed it. And so when we see this, that is one explanation when we look at the Bible in its entirety, that we can say this fits with the way God is presented throughout. So this is not an isolated, odd incident. It fits in this context. And so we can say, I believe this is what's taking place here. And so you have Saul who is, and it seems to come and go. This isn't something that's perpetual. We see Saul in this instance being persecuted or tormented by this evil spirit. And so David's doing good. Saul's got the evil spirit on him, and he tries to pin David to the wall with the spear. But David gets away, thank goodness. Verse 11, then Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him in order to put him to death in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, this is Saul's daughter, by the way, if you've forgotten, told him, saying, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be put to death. Meaning, get out of here, you're going to die in the morning. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went out and fled and escaped. Michal took the household idol and laid it in the bed and put a quilt of goat's hair at its head and covered it with cloths. When Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he is sick. Then Saul sent messengers to see David, saying, bring him up to me on his bed, that I may put him to death. When the messengers entered, behold, the household idol was on the bed, and the quilt of goat's hair at its head. So Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me like this, and let my enemy go, so that he has escaped? And Michal said to Saul, he said to me, let me go. Why should I put you to death? Now, when we look at this, it's amusing. It's a good kind of escape story. Michael, or Michelle, however you pronounce that in ancient Hebrew, not certain. Michael's the way I've always pronounced it in my head, so that's what we're going to go with. Michael is David's wife, Saul's daughter. She was given to David for his, battle prowess, and because Saul thought it was a way to control David. It says it specifically. And so, but she does seem to have some loyalty to her husband, which is a good thing. She loved him. It said it when they were courting, what Saul meant to be a controlling factor. We know that she was not always pleased with him. She was the one who told him he was dancing in the street in his underwear wasn't appropriate. But that's what he was doing. He was in a robe, I jest, I'm sorry. But in this moment, she saves him. She says, listen, he's coming to kill you. You need to get out. And if you want to live to see tomorrow, you'll go tonight. And so he does. And she doesn't go so far. So, at that point, she could, and this is where the levity, the humorous nature of everything kind of really takes place. She could have just said, he's gone, I don't know where he is. David flees all the time, apparently. He escapes Saul. And so for him to have caught wind of something and gotten out, no big deal. But they set up a trick. They put the household idol. Now that begs some questions right there. Why do they have a household idol in their house? We aren't given any explanation of that. God did not permit any graven image of himself per the Ten Commandments, but they have a household idol. So whatever that is, I don't think it's probably a good thing. I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. I think it's not good. But they put this in the bed, and they use it as a decoy for David to escape. And it upset Saul that his daughter has betrayed him. But then she kind of says, listen, he said to me, this is at the end of verse 17, let me go. Why should I put you to death? David was escaping. Her life was in jeopardy, is what was being said there. And so, we know she helped him out the window, but she gets Dad off her back that, he threatened me. I had to get him out. So that's what we have there. In verse 18, the story continues. It says, now David fled and escaped and came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and stayed at Naioth. It was told Saul, saying, behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah. Then Saul sent messengers to take David. But when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying with Samuel standing and presiding over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. When it was told Saul, he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. So Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they also prophesied. Then he himself went to Ramah, and came as far as the large well that is in Seku, and he asked and said, where are Samuel and David? And someone said, behold, they are at Naioth in Ramah. He proceeded there to Naioth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him also, so that he went along prophesying continually until he came to Naioth in Ramah. He also stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay down naked all that day and all that night. Therefore they say, is Saul among the prophets. Now, if you have cross-references in your Bible, there's going to be a few things that you may link back to, and 1 Samuel 10 should be a place that shows up through a lot of this, particularly verses 10 through 12. We see Samuel with this band of prophets previously in chapter 10. And they're coming down off the mountain, and in that instant too, Saul shows up, runs into him, and he begins to prophesy. And it says that they began a saying or something they said, is Saul among the prophets? Is Saul among the prophets? And there's some question about who the prophets are. We know Samuel is the prophet. We knew Eli served the tabernacle. And so there are prophets Eli had heard from God, because when Samuel came to him, he kept hearing God's voice, and Eli said, "That's God speaking to you. Say, let him know you're here." So we know Eli had that encounter before. So Eli had prophet experiences. Samuel is a prophet. There are certainly other prophets, perhaps in Israel, but is there really this big band of prophets out in the desert? Maybe. One of the ways that you can explain this is that these are people with the prophets who are prophesying and worshiping God. So some of them could have been servants in the temple the same way like Eli, or the tabernacle at this time. Eli was a servant in the tabernacle. And they would have musicians who were still from the tribe of Levi. Remember, this is after the Exodus. God had already set across the tribes, or set out the tribes. He had already said that the Levites were going to be his servants. They're going to serve him. And so they were the ones in the tabernacle. Eli and all his people were from the tribe of Levi. They were Levites. And so maybe this was just a gathering of people with prophets, and they're worshiping, they're musicians, they're temple or tabernacle servants, and they are the prophets. It's a possibility. But we know there are a group of prophets there. And what else do we know is there, or who else do we know is there? The Spirit of God is there. So when David flees after Michal helps him out of the window, he goes to Samuel in Naoth of Ramah, and he stays with them there in this band of prophets, or these worship people, and the Spirit of the Lord is there. And so the first band that Saul sends in, what do? They get there and they begin to prophesy. So he gets upset. So what does he do? He sends a second one. They begin to prophesy. He gets upset again. What does he do the third time? He sends another group. What do? They begin to prophesy. So what would the logical conclusion be? Saul says, "I got to go." Now, Saul has run into this group before, and what happened? He prophesied. He has now sent 3 groups to this group of people, and they've all prophesied. When you talk about not thinking a plan through, that's kind of what Saul is doing here. He said, "I'm going," and he's just forgetting everything that he's experienced thus far. So he gets there, and what happens? He begins to prophesy. But it is not a glamorous prophesying. It is a humbling prophesying. It does say that the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him because he begins to prophesy. So God is interacting with him. But in this experience, he is stripped and lays down in the dirt naked for a day. Anytime you see day and night, that's meant to, they're conveying the idea of the whole day. This is where Saul finds himself. So why we kind of again go back to the beginning. That's the end of the chapter. But when we try to wrap it up, you can kind of see this bookending of images in this passage tonight. Is that it starts off with Saul being upset that David is getting recognition to a greater degree than he is. And how does it end? With Saul laying face down naked in the dirt. So, when it talks about God having removed his spirit or his hand from Saul, and Saul having to deal with these issues that he's dealing with, you can see that just in the contrast between the two, between David and Saul. And this is where, when you go through the rest of Kings and into Chronicles, when we start going through the kings after David and Solomon, we go through their lineages, you start seeing this repetitions repeated over and over again. He was a good king, he was a bad king, he was a good king, he was a bad king. We see that begun here with David and Saul. Saul was not a good king. And he is constantly being contrasted with David, who was a good king. And so you see this conflict and this contrast between the two of them. So even in this passage, David goes out and conquers, Saul gets mad. Saul tries to kill David. David flees, and his friend is pleading on his behalf. David escapes and goes to Samuel. He's there with the prophets, and he's